We thought we will take a look at sorting on the sheet. By the way, we make spec sheet software for interior designers. And sorting how you look at your project is kind of a big deal. Um, yeah, maybe a few words before we dive in about what kind of the default mode is, and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, all right. So maybe first of all, just talk about a little bit where we were with this, with our spec sheets in the first place. So this is sort of how our spec sheets looked at first. So we had just the spaces to organize everything you had within a sheet. So our core idea was to create like a way for interior designers and interior architects to really change the way they want to see their specs, change the way they can edit them, see them, and just generally the way they work around it. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I'll actually give a little bit of background as well. So why we made the change was because of a kind of a personal project. So we like to use the sheet at home ourselves as well. And I was working on a relatively sizable summer house project and was adding products and products and products, and and after a while it became really difficult to navigate. And so we were thinking about the kind of the alternatives, right? So where most interior designers handle their projects, which is Excel as tabs. It's a little bit better because you can create some sort of differentiation. You can have your furnishings, you can have your fixtures on different tabs, but that's a kind of a very a 2D two-dimensional view. You either look at the fixtures or you either look at something else. But what if you would want to see everything that's in a room, so not separated by different categories, but by spaces? And what if you wanted to create a mix of all of the above? And this is kind of how we landed on this current sorting iteration, right?
yeah, and maybe a little bit about the background as well as just the fact that you can't, for example, see all of the budgeting in the same place if you start using all these different tabs, and generally it's more difficult to get like a full overview for both you as well as the client regarding all of the project. So maybe before we like delve into it more than that, it's good to just show you how it works. So here we have a sheet from our sample project, and already you can see, for example, all the furniture and all the tables in the same place. Same way as I scroll down, we can see all of the chairs in one place and all of the sofas, shelving, etc. Now that's only one way of looking at the project. If I take away these tables from here, we can see all of the furniture within the project. So everything from chairs to tables to shelving, etc. And now if I want to add space to it, so generally maybe a little bit of background. There are spaces to all of our products, meaning you assign space however you define it. It can be either like a room, it can be some sort of a category that you've purposed for the project. But
So yeah, so
in the
either a
yeah
room or an area or something like that. So on purpose, we kept it kind of loose. We're talking about spaces, not rooms, because it's not always a room that you need to design. Sometimes it's maybe just a part of the room. Sometimes it's the whole building. Sometimes it's your backyard. So usually when we talk about spaces, you could think about them as rooms, but that's not always the case.
yeah, exactly. So in this case, we can see everything by the spaces. So in this case, because it's an apartment, there's living room as a space. There is also, for example, let me just scroll down a little bit more, a dining room, a kitchen, You get the point. So in this case, you can see all of these spaces and the categories together, but you can also just close the categories altogether and just see everything by space. So for example, everything that's in a living room. And we find this especially useful when we go into the card view that we also have, where you can really get like a general sort of feeling. So it almost kind of works as a mood board in a way that you can see all the furniture that's within a space and kind of get the idea of how different materials match, how different furnishing items match. And yeah, that can be especially, I think, useful for the client.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing you mentioned that this view or this approach, this sorting functionality is a tool for the interior designer, but you can also, when you share your project share the project with your client, they can use the same feature and look at the project from different angles in exactly the same way.
Yeah. And if you don't want any sort of sorting at all, you can just close the sort of final chip as well and just see all of the products you have within that project. So I think for us, it was really important to find sort of like an intuitive and easily modifiable way, I would say, where really the user is in control of how they want to look at it. And I think that's sort of the biggest issue that we wanted to fix is because these other platforms, such as, for example, Excel or Google Sheets, they kind of create the way of working for you, when instead we wanted to have the way you work in your own hands as a designer or architect, where you can really choose what you want to look at a specific time.
Yeah, I think what was important for us and is important for us not only for this feature, but we kind of try to keep that in mind for everything we do is how do we keep this simple? So like how do we give you an opportunity to sort, divide your project kind of in any way you would want without creating unnecessary complexity. Like you could do the same thing over multiple screens, behind multiple clicks, and so on. And this is something that we're always conscious of trying to avoid. Yeah, I think that was also kind of one of our guiding principles with sorting as well. How do we put everything on one screen, but also make it so you can understand what's going on and your head isn't going to explode while you look at it.
Yeah, and I think just what happens a lot of times is that if we're looking for a simple solution, it kind of came to us in a rather simple way as well. So right when we started talking about it, we thought about like a potential solution to use some sort of chips because they're very intuitive. They're also visually very clear. So they're perfect for headings in that sense. So in that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the solution, which is so simple in the way it works, also came very logically for us, which was sort of nice part of the process when something kind of falls on your lap in a way, just because it made the most sense in an intuitive way. And I think
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely. Yeah.
in terms of the process, so when we just take maybe a quick look into how we built it up for our cycle. So this is sort of like the final refined version that you see here, but also when we go down a little bit to sort of the first ideas and ideations, I think the most difficult part was to understand that it is sorting and not filtering. So there is a very clear definition difference between those. So let's say I'm just opening up this sample that I had a while back when we were only starting work on this. Is it was very difficult to keep the distinction. What is sorting and what is filtering? And it was really important that filtering, so maybe just throw the definition in there, sort of is that everything is still visible that you have. It doesn't take anything away at any point. It only organizes the way you see things. So in this
Yeah,
case,
but
for example, yeah,
I mean, we can get to this later as well when we talk about our future plans, kind of. But filtering was part of the project when we first started it. But that's kind of left right now for a second version. But we
yeah.
can talk about that a little bit later once we get there.
But yeah, I just wanted to show as well from the process is just that at first we really thought about, how can we implement different categories, for example, already into the system. But the more we worked on it, the more we just realized that it's actually only about this simple on and off button, let's say. There's no need to choose anything. It's just about, one click on, one click off, and you can change everything that you see within your screen. So
Mm.
it sort of worked out really well in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, at least I find it useful. The same project that I mentioned a little while ago. After this implementation, you can now get. I have around 200 items in that project, different products and so on, and it's now manageable. You can now understand, okay, I want to work on this bathroom, so I'll have all of this stuff for the bathroom in your view, or I just want to look at the furniture. I can do that. So it makes it a big project much easier to digest, kind of, or understand what's going on, navigate in some sense.
Yeah. And I think also, speaking of the sort of process, it's always interesting how like changing one feature can change a bunch of other things in the UI. So, for example, previously it was, I think, very easy to understand also how to add products and spaces because we
Mm.
had these two buttons underneath every space. So it's very clear that you're adding a product to this specific living room. But obviously, because of our new way of sorting things, there was no way to implement this anymore. So for that, we actually came up with this solution. So everything you want to add to the project is under one button on the right bottom of your screen, which actually allowed us also to implement features that we previously had sort of mixed around the UI and add everything into one place. So every time you want to add a space, every time you want to add a product, or every time you want to add a product from your product library, it's all very easily navigatable and in the same place. So I think it was also a great example of how if you make one thing simpler, kind of all the pieces started
Mm.
falling together and coming into one in the whole user interface.
Yeah, I mean, now we're going to use that same little button, the plus icon place, for other new stuff that we're coming out with.
Exactly. So again, like if you want to sort of build an intuitive digital product, then it's always important that there are the similarities and the same button locations in all the different screens and navigation, so that the user can really understand what they're looking for or what something is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. Um, yeah, I think it's a relatively simple feature. So I think we've covered most of what we did and what we were talking about. What I did allude to was that there were a few things missing that we wanted to do on the first go around, but we didn't get around to, and mainly that's filtering. That's one thing we think could make this even easier. So, just it, and it doesn't, filtering. It's kind of it just it makes it removes distraction in a sense, right? So it doesn't really do much more. Like you could scroll to the place the same way right now, and you could see the same stuff right now. But with filtering, you just open it, you just kind of clearing the underbrush there, and it's just everything. Only the things you want to have are visible, and nothing else. So that as we wanted to make sure that we get the sorting out as fast as we could, we didn't spend time on the filtering because it is a nice to have thing, but also it is nice to have. So we're still going to do it. Um, soon, hopefully,
Yeah,
with
and
some
that,
other things that are not, so we'll try to beef up the whole filtering functionality. Right now it's only status, but when we do come out with this edition, there'll be a bunch of stuff you can filter by.
so yeah, and I think that's sort of the final step to really make the whole way of working customizable. So currently, as Oliver already mentioned, we already have statuses for the statuses. But once we have, for example, all the categories mentioned here, that means that you can, depending on the phase, for example, that you're working on the project, you can remove all furniture items for that specific time period when you're maybe focusing more on, let's say, pictures and wall paints, flooring, etc. So it will really make it easy for you to still, collect furniture that you think would maybe fit later on in the project, but it's not currently a focus of yours. So you can really sort of customize the screen for that specific time of the project.
Yeah, and something else that we're um, thinking about and working on right now is exports. And so this is also something where this could come into play. Like you set your filters, and then you use the export functionality to then export a PDF or a CSV of what you see, what you have there on your screen. So that's maybe even one of the more important ways where this would come into use.
Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty. Anything we've missed so far on sorting?
I think it's it's pretty straightforward.
All right, let's wrap it up then. Okay, thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Oliver.
Bye.
Bye.